Everyone is conditioned a certain way. I'm talking about all people, all of us. We're all programmed to believe what we read, who we listen to, who we follow. And this conditioning happens at a very early age. I remember my parents telling me things that if you crack your knuckles, it's going to lead to arthritis. Swallowing gum takes 7 years to digest. If you crush your eyes, they get stuck that way. We all have some of these things that we remember, and sometimes we believe it so much that we pass it on to our own kids before we find out that a lot of this is not true. But it's been told to us so many times, over and over and over again, to the point where you just start believing it. When you're conditioned a certain way, trained to think a certain way, it's incredibly difficult to change. It's just the way we're built. We don't like that. We like to believe what we want to believe. We don't like change. Most people don't like change. It's very difficult. Doing something that you don't believe in or listening to someone that you never liked. It's not easy. In the investment world, people like this are called perma bears or perma bulls. Simply means you're either super bearish or bullish, no matter what the data tells you. Doesn't matter. It doesn't even matter if things change. That's just the way you are. You may say, Frank, that sounds a little crazy. It's not. If you want, go back, Google, right? We all have Google. Go back to March, the March lows this year, and look at the headlines. And then go back to the March lows in 2009, credit crisis. You can go back to almost every single crash, go further and further. If you look at perma bears, they don't turn bullish during these times when the market crashes. They never do. They think it's going to get even worse. They pound the table on their thesis. They become even more bearish at the bottom. That's the way they're programmed. If you look at politics, try changing the mind of someone that's far left or far right. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what data is presented to them. And even if they see it with their own eyes through a video, they don't care. Their agenda is their agenda. They condition to think one way, and nobody will ever, ever change their mind. Now, why am I bringing this up? Because I read a post from someone I respect that's incredibly smart. This was recent, just a few days ago. This person actually worked at the Fed, which means the job is to analyze data probably 10 hours a day and come up with unbiased conclusions based on the data. That's our so-called Fed, what they're supposed to do. And recently, this person posted something about COVID. And this person actually retweeted. And it says how it's crazy that people still think COVID is like a bad cold. And I was surprised by that post. So in February and into March, I would have agreed. You listen to this podcast, you know I've been covering this since January, well before almost anyone else out there in Wall Street. Extensively. Tell you to go to John Hopkins' website before everyone knew existed. Now it's a standard. It's amazing. Talking to doctors, interviewing people in other countries that are on quarantine, showing you how crazy this is and how it's going to spread rapidly. But in February, March, yeah, I agree with this. COVID, far more dangerous than the flu or bad cold. You go into June, pretty much I thought the same thing. But then something interesting happened. The data started to change. We started learning more about this disease, who it attacks, how kids barely have any symptoms, how more than 90% of these COVID deaths come from people who are older than 65. Because the data changed significantly, because the first indication of all this data coming in and COVID killing people was in New York City. When it was someone's bright idea to put, again, nobody really knew about the disease. I just hate that no one wants to take responsibility for it. It's politically here, I understand it. But they decided to put people who were infected with COVID in nursing homes, which resulted in the worst thing you could possibly do. Tons of deaths, to the fact we're sending ships along the coastline with extra hospitals that we wind up never using. And I'm not knocking that decision, because looking at the data at the beginning, all we see is a virus that's spreading and killing people like crazy. And it's scary as hell. It's killed 8% of the people. 8% of the people that get it. But now the data is changing. We're learning more about this disease. And last week, one of the biggest stats I've seen, which is a game changer, comes from the CDC. And I hate that both parties are using it as a political tool. But it's an election year and things have, in my lifetime, never been this crazy on a political front. I've never seen it. Riots, people dying in the streets, crazy, just lies everywhere. I've never seen it like this. Maybe it's just me. But forget about politics for just a minute. I know we all have strong opinions on it, but just forget about it. Because this information is not just vital for the economy, for the health of the entire population, but it's also extremely relevant to investors. So the CDC came out and said this. Of the approximately 180,000 deaths, COVID deaths, less than 10,000 died from COVID by itself, which amounts to about 6% of the people who died just from COVID. Now, if you're on the left, you already want to shut this off. Hear me out. It's not going to be political, I promise. Promise. About 6% of people who died just from COVID. The rest, a vast majority, had on average 2.6 serious additional diseases, with the addition, in most cases, of extreme advanced age. Again, I see both sides using these stories to benefit their own agendas. Twitter even banned this tweet after Trump reposted it, even though it's from the CDC, so I'm not sure why. I mean, it is a political real. Actually, I do know why. But this data is extremely relevant. And when I look at it from an unbiased filter, here's what I come up with. We're still talking about 180,000 Americans who died. And COVID did cause these deaths. In other words, if COVID did not exist, sure, many of these people may have died from their underlying conditions, but COVID accelerated this process. So I agree with Dr. Fauci, who was asked this about 50 times, but it was on Good Morning America. He responded to one of their questions, and he said, look, there are 180,000 plus deaths. These are real deaths from COVID-19. Let there not be any confusion about that. And I'm quoting him, and he's right. With that said, COVID is not a disease we all have to fear. It's like a cold in terms of symptoms if you're under 50 years old. And if you're under 15 years old, which I mentioned last week, the death rate of kids under 15 that died from COVID from February 1st to August 15th on the CDC website is 0.04%. Remember that number. Because the death rate of kids under 15 that died from the flu, which is in the same chart, over the same time frame, is 1.6%. That's a massive difference. Both risks are very low, but there's a greater chance, if you catch the flu, of dying if you're under 15 years old than COVID. That's on the CDC website. These are facts. The data is changing. As of today, 90% of all deaths from COVID in the U.S. come from people who are over 65 years old. So we need to protect our elders. We know this now. Have you ever walked into a store and no masks? Sometimes, not often. I mean, some people are against it. But for me in Florida, who's been basically open since July, it's done a great job. Death rate's down tremendously. Yeah, cases spike, but everything's cool. You're not seeing death rate go up. You're seeing businesses open, practicing social distancing. But you still see people wear masks. Most of us. We need to continue to do that. We need to be conscious of this, protecting our elders, protecting people in a danger zone, especially if they have underlying conditions. We're learning that from the data, where COVID alone only killed 6% of these people. Alone. And this is why they may fast track a vaccine, which a lot of people don't agree with, and I don't agree with. And I don't think anybody under 40 years old, I should say anyone under 30 years old, should think of taking this vaccine if it's available by the end of this year. Don't even think about it. This is a bad cold. Why risk that? Why risk it? But they want to fast track the vaccine for people who are over 65 that are facing death. So I get it. You know, people are going to tell you, like, you're going to fast track a vaccine, and what happens if it doesn't work? Or what are the risks? How do you fast track that? Especially since the quickest we brought a vaccine to market was 4 years, 1967, all the way back then. Granted, we have a lot more money going into our healthcare companies to produce this. The government is supporting it. A lot of these companies are working together, partnering with other companies. It's amazing to try to get a vaccine. But the vaccine is extremely important for the people in a danger zone. And I could see the fast track, even though I don't agree with it. But if you have an underlying condition and you get COVID, there's a strong chance that you're going to be in trouble. Then I'd rather try a vaccine than not try anything. Again, talking about a certain age group. Outside of this demographic, we need to open everything up across the United States. Every restaurant, every movie theater, every gym, every theme park, every city. Forget politics, forget about the election. This is an easy choice based on the data, the science, based on the massive risks of comparing it where you're keeping the economy closed. You see the latest studies of depression and suicides. And someone that's tracking this data and track it state by state, and not just about COVID and deaths and percentage rates, but the reopening of businesses. I'm doing this since January. It's finally nice to see that the states are starting to agree. You know, you see on TV how people are worried and crazy and trying to scare the hell out of you. You know, making fun of Pelosi because everything's closed and no salons are open. Then she went to a salon with no mask on, and everybody. He did the same thing with Chris Christie. Remember when he closed the beach? Can't go on the beach. And then he took his family to the beach. That crushed his career, by the way. Might have already been a downfall. But it's just funny how some people are saying some things and yet not allowing our politicians, government, not allowing us to do things, yet they're doing it themselves. But if you're looking at, say, one part of this, casual dining restaurants, this is a great analysis from Goldman Sachs. 91% of casual dining restaurants are open. That's up from 87% last week. And of those, 52% are allowing indoor dining. And most of it's at 25% capacity. It's getting bigger and bigger depending on what state. But at least they're opening because they're looking at the data. California is planning to reopen casual dining. They said August 31st, which makes sense. They pulled back a bit as infections started to increase, but nice to see California opening back up. Not everything is positive with California. I'm going to explain in a minute. New Jersey said they're going to reopen dining rooms for the first time since March. And it's going to take place on September 4th. And they're going to start at 25% capacity. Okay, which makes sense. You start slow, but nice to see them starting these reopenings. Anchorage, Miami, open up at 50% capacity. Florida, which I just mentioned, where I live. Hey, my family just ate at a Longhorn. There's about 50% capacity. Everyone wearing masks until they were seated. Everyone was spaced out for social distancing. Waiters, waitresses, everybody who worked there wearing masks. Felt totally comfortable. Fine. And I told you about 2 months ago. We went to a water park with my kids. It was about 20% capacity. Everyone practicing social distancing. Everyone getting their temperature taken before they went in. It was great. I'm fine. Everything was cool. We were all following the rules. But then we look at the restaurant mecca, the biggest and best of them all, New York City, where Governor Cuomo, who really has his head up his ass. I mean, I can't say it better than that. But he said that New York City is not ready for indoor dining. He's keeping everything closed. He's the guy that said, we're going to follow science. We're going to follow science. He's maintaining that directive that people coming into New York City, and I think it's like 10 states, but still be quarantined for 14 days. And it's kind of funny when you think about it because the CDC said, this is over a week ago, that 14-day quarantines from travel, both domestic and international, are no longer needed in the United States. But Cuomo knows more than the CDC now. And he says that Trump is in bed with them, even though Trump destroyed them completely for the whole disaster with China and the World Health Organization and how they came back from China saying that you got nothing to worry about. Now all of a sudden they like Trump? Really? Is that what you're saying? That they're in bed together? But I guess Cuomo doesn't want to follow science. And what a disaster it's creating. I mean, look at New York City right now. Won't rant about it again. I did that already. But it's just incredible to see the amount of people moving out. What evidence do you need? The massive increase in homicides. And yet Cuomo, all they want to do is defund the police, increase tax. Did you see that? They want to increase, they just announced, they want to increase taxes on the rich. Yeah, that's a pretty good way to get them back into the city. That makes a lot of sense, guys. Let's just keep every effing store closed forever. That's what they want. And like I said last week, they're not doing this out of stupidity or they don't know any better. This is being done intentionally. You've seen all the other cities open up. Democrat or Republican, they're starting to open up. Why isn't New York City opening up? And I know you went through one of the toughest periods compared to any other state. That your deaths, the amount of deaths, if you were a country, would equal fourth largest in the country, and you're just a state. I get it. But you got to follow the data. You got to be willing to change. Because right now they're intentionally destroying the greatest city in the world. There's no denying that. I don't care what side you're on. Now, outside of New York City, theaters are opening up. About 1,600, which is 25% across the country. AMC said 70% of their theaters are open. They're going to be open probably this week. But I want to get back to California real quick. So California was about to let Disney open parks. Now, in Florida, Disney's parks are in Florida as well, and they open in July. I think it's 25% capacity. I know a lot of people that went. They said it's great. It's not as crowded. Everybody's okay. Nobody came back and died. But California has this crazy tier system, which is based on infections, not deaths, just infections. And it's crazy to where this is public information. Go Google it or whatever. California tier system, to where if more than 7 people test positive for COVID out of 100,000 in a county, then non-essential indoor businesses need to remain closed. Non-essential is gyms, hair salons, restaurants, most of the stores. And they call this tier widespread. That's what it's called. Now, you need less than 1%. Again, it's different tiers. Let's go to the other side of it. You need less than one new COVID cases per 100,000. So zero cases, right? Less than one. They actually put less than one new COVID case per 100,000 per county, right? They call this tier minimal. So if you have that, which is no cases, your indoor businesses can open with modifications. So translation, if you have 0 cases of infections being reported per 100,000 in a county, you can open, but only with modifications. Why in the hell would you have modifications if nobody's freaking infected? It's insane. I'm not telling you to open up at 100%, but 70, 75%. If you have no infection out of 100,000 people in a county, you're still going to have modifications? Is it going to be 25%, 30%, 40%? It's almost telling you that once this goes away, we're never going to open up at more than 75% again. And that could happen. I'm hoping it doesn't, because we're learning more about this disease. Now, I'm throwing a lot of stats at you, and I'm always aware of that because I want to make it so you're not listening to a bunch of numbers and just saying, oh, this is crazy. You need to understand this. Because it's the biggest point, and a lot of you listen to this as investors and want new ideas. But from an investment standpoint, I said this 3 weeks ago, COVID risk is going to continue to die down. More and more people, they're seeing the stats. They're seeing thousands of athletes contract COVID, nobody dying. They're seeing some of their friends catch it now. I have a couple of friends who had it. And the ones with no underlying conditions and who are under 65 years old, they're sick for about 10 days, and then they're hanging out again. You might have a couple of cases where they say lungs and this few, but for the majority, we're talking about the data that's available. I probably know about 15 people that had it. Nobody told me that they had any side effects or its continued effects from the disease after they no longer have it. I haven't heard it. Are there a few? Yeah, there's going to be a couple. But you need to know the whole picture, the whole story. And of course, we must continue social distancing. I'm not saying open everything up, no more masks, hey, everything's fine. No. We must protect the people in a danger zone. Even with schools reopening, it's up to the parents to send their kids back, not up to the government, since every situation is different. Hey, maybe you have elders in your house. Maybe you have someone with an underlying respiratory condition, and you don't want your kid contracting it and coming home because you know chances are very, 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 very 99.8% that if your kid contracts it, they're going to be okay if they have no underlying conditions. It's just a bad cold. But still, if they contracted it, give it to someone who's at risk, Could be a lot of trouble. Even teachers. I know one teacher that has an underlying health condition that's not going back and doing online. That's understandable. It's not everyone, all you kids. I mean, you should never tell parents, your kids have to go back to school, but they should have the option because of the data, not the government. They should be closing schools like crazy. You see these outbreaks in North Carolina, take these kids' temperatures. And by the way, Alabama, they came out with a story in Alabama, over 1,000 people infected through 3 schools in Alabama. And you keep reading that story, 0 of those people were even hospitalized. 0. They're not going to tell you that. They're scare the shit out of you, right? The media does. That's why you watch it. So you can tell your friends, holy shit, see Alabama, go back to school. Everyone's getting it. They don't want to tell you that there was no hospitalizations. They don't want to say that. But we need to keep people protected who are at risk, which is not a major part of the population, especially the working population. But almost every piece of economic data is getting stronger and stronger. It's not even on a monthly basis, on a weekly basis. Look at home prices. Surging, new home sales through the roof, manufacturing surging, where the ISM index for August posted its highest reading since January 2019. And it was due to a surge in new orders. Personal income and spending were better than expected. I'm not a cheerleader here. I'm looking at the data. So from an investor's point of view, I know it's difficult when you're watching the Zooms go crazy. By the way, those numbers were absolutely insane. I don't think I've ever seen a company. Man, it's just incredible how fast that they're growing. I've never seen a company grow that fast, I think, in 25 years in terms of where they are in revenue and just from last year. It's just incredible. But you're watching the Apples, the Teslas rocket higher almost alongside most digital stocks. But start positioning yourself in the names that have been most impacted from COVID because things are going to get better and better. The airlines, hotels, casinos, cruise lines. Doing a lot of research on these industries over the past few weeks. My Curzio Venture Opportunity, I recommended 3 companies within these sectors. Almost everyone is seeing huge bookings for 2021, which is important. Meaning once COVID ends, and it's going to end, it's going to get better. We're going to get a vaccine, probably. People feel more comfortable. They're going to want to get out of their house and go crazy. Everybody's done with this. And it's one thing if you're seeing a neighbor die, this person, you're not seeing people die. You saw most of these deaths take place at the beginning. The death rate now is below 3%. It's like 2.9, going lower and lower on a weekly basis. The people are dying to get out, travel, go on vacation. Instead of buying the Zooms at 250 times forward earnings, and it is trading at that right now, 250 times forward earnings. And again, their numbers were just insane in terms of sales and earnings. But instead of buying these high flyers that are trading at valuations that, I mean, I follow the analysts. These analysts are having trouble explaining. They're starting to remove their target price because they just we don't know how high these things could go, which is pretty scary when you think about it. Even the most bullish analysts. That's why you're seeing when Netflix target gets rated, it's to the street high. And it's only a little bit higher than where the price is currently trading. Same with Tesla. It's a little bit higher than when the price is currently trading. But instead of buying these crazy names, start getting exposure to those sectors. Those airlines, hotels, casinos, cruise lines. Most are still down considerably from their highs, and their numbers are only going to get better and better. Plus, this is very important. They're some of the largest employees in the United States, so you know the government's going to support these names if this lasts a little bit longer. Or if people still feel like, after Q1 next year, that I still, I don't want to fly too much. I don't know if I want to travel. The government's right there. They're going to back up these names, which does what? It protects you, right? It lowers your risk. They're not going to let Delta and Southwest, MGM go under. They won't. And they're not even near that. I mean, these companies have taken out debt, have done a great job. Those companies that I mentioned, not all of them. They've seen really, really strong bookings in 2021. Let's see, because maybe they push those out even further, depending on how bad COVID is. But they have enough cash to withstand at least 12 months, some of them 18 months of 25% capacity, and they're at that right now. But I think we'll all agree it's going to get better. It's going to get busier. And I've known a couple of people who went to Vegas, and they said it was pretty crowded, and people are going, and it's getting busier and busier. And all this government spending, it's not going to stop anytime soon.